Hello, welcome to the 36th Legislative District Democrats. I'm Dr. Laura Marie Rivera, and today we have Lindsay Calkins, who is a candidate for Seattle Municipal Judge. And Lindsay, would you take this opportunity to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thank you. And thank you everyone for having me. I'm so grateful to be here tonight. My name is Lindsay Calkins, and I'm running for Seattle Municipal Court for open seat number 5. I began my legal career here in Seattle working as a paralegal at an immigration law firm doing deportation defense work. I was also able to work at a civil rights law firm helping attorneys represent individuals who had been wrongfully convicted. Those experiences inspired me to go to law school and to devote my legal career to public service. Fast forward to today, and I've lived and practiced law in Seattle for over 15 years, and I'm raising my 3 children here in Capitol Hill. I'm running for judge now because of what I see every day as a parent and as a neighbor. I want my family and all families in our city to feel safe, supported, and part of a community that truly works for everyone. In my legal career, I have a history as a law clerk and as a public defender, and I currently focus on criminal appeals and resentencing work. That means I spend my time looking closely at cases after the fact and asking whether the process was fair, whether the outcome was just, and what could have been done differently. I've seen how much it matters that judges get it right the first time, and how much trust is built or lost based on whether people feel heard and respected in the courtroom. I care deeply about access to justice. In my work with the King County Bar Association and the First Responder Will Clinic, I work to expand access to legal services and help meet people where they are. I also serve as a moot court judge at the University of Washington, helping to train young people who are interested in a career in the law. I'm running because municipal court is often the front door to the justice system. It's where people decide whether or not the system is fair. We need judges who are committed to equity, who understand the real world impact of their decisions, and who are focused on outcomes that actually make our community stronger. In many cases, that means looking beyond incarceration alone and considering approaches that reduce harm, support stability, and make it less likely that someone returns to the system. The most important thing as a judge is to follow the law and to get it right. But where we do have discretion, I want to focus on using evidence-based research to support sentencings and ongoing supervision that actually works. Very quickly, Seattle Municipal Court is the largest court of limited jurisdiction in the state, and the latest estimate that I saw was that 7,500 cases move through that court every year. We need individuals who can act efficiently, quickly, and fairly. I'm proud right now to be endorsed by, among others, County Executive Zahalai and Councilmember Mosqueda, and you can see the rest of the list on my website. I would be honored to earn your support and your endorsement, and that is the end of my introduction.
Thank you, Lindsay. Our first question from our membership will be offered to you by Joanna.
Hi. So you address a little bit of this in your introduction, but I'll give you a chance to answer the question directly. Voters don't always understand the difference between the different courts and what cases they handle. What is the job of the municipal court, and how do you explain the differences between courts at different levels?
Yes, I absolutely appreciate this question because that is absolutely true. And I think I will talk to attorneys nowadays where they have no idea what the municipal court does, right? The way that I think about it is Seattle Municipal Court handles cases that happen within the jurisdiction of Seattle proper. And usually the caseload of the municipal court is probably 95% misdemeanors. So any crime that is punishable up to 364 days, typically those look like DUIs, DWLS, some petty thefts, some assault in the fourth degree, protective orders, things like that. And that's primarily the bailiwick of that court. The King County Superior Court covers the entire county of King County, and they have plenary jurisdiction, so they will handle felonies, they handle large civil cases, and they have jurisdiction over larger cases that the municipal court doesn't have jurisdiction over, in part because the Seattle Municipal Code doesn't legislate those things. And then the courts of appeals then review the errors that were made by the Superior Court or lower courts. We also have King County District Court, which is also a county court, but King County District Court is very similar to Seattle Municipal Court in the sense that they also adjudicate misdemeanors and very small civil cases, but they handle cases that happen typically outside of the city limits of Seattle, so in unincorporated King County, or in cases where certain cities haven't um, chosen to prosecute those misdemeanors, if that makes sense. But I'm happy to follow up on. I feel like that was a very dry answer, but I'm happy to follow up if there are any questions about that.
That is very informative. Thank you, Lindsay. Our second member question is coming from Anita.
Most non-lawyers or folks not in contact with the court don't really know how to make a decision on how to vote for judges, and many don't vote because of that. How do you recommend voters figure out who to vote for in a judicial race? And how do we ensure that judicial races do not become de facto partisan?
I really appreciate this question as well. I think since I've been voting in Seattle for over 15 years, and we have intentionally nonpartisan judicial races in Washington, it's been a very interesting issue to me because I moved here from a jurisdiction where judicial races were partisan, and that could make it easier in certain ways to choose who you're going to vote for, right? But in this case, I feel that in addition to reading your voter's guide and doing what research you can and talking to your trusted community members, I tend to look at people's experience and I tend to look at endorsements, either from colleagues and former colleagues, opposing counsel, especially judges, leaders, and other community members. I think it's also important to look at how a candidate talks about the role. Are they committed to impartiality? Do they seem like they understand the limits of judicial power? Do they demonstrate that they would be respectful to everyone who comes into the courtroom? I think honestly, here as well as in other parts of the state, we could do a better job of putting our judicial candidates in front of community members and making sure, in particular in unopposed races, that voters have the information that they need to make a decision about what to do. I think that there is, when it comes to unopposed judicial races, I think it's complicated because what, it seems like what should you do with your vote, right? And you want to make sure that your vote matters, but you don't necessarily want to vote for someone just because they happen to hold the seat. And I think it's important, even in cases where the seat is unopposed, to keep asking that person what their values are, keep asking that person how they've changed since they've been on the bench. What are they seeing now? What is the latest in your courtroom? What are the most important priorities right now? And that's part of what we do as community members to hold our elected officials to account.
Thank you. We can add that to our to-do list to talk to all of those unopposed candidates. And we have question number 3 is coming from Howard.
Hi. So, as artificial intelligence tools become more prevalent in legal settings, how have you observed their use in the courtroom, and what standards would guide courts in balancing efficiency with the risks related to bias, reliability, and fairness?
This question is very interesting. I'm co-chair of the King County Bar Association Judicial and Litigation Committee. And in that role, I help put together the annual Bench Bar Conference for the KCBA. And in 2004, we put on a conference for the bench and the bar specifically devoted to the use of AI in the legal context. And so we had a panel of practitioners talk about how they were using it, effectively, how they were using it efficiently, and most importantly, how they were using it ethically. And then we had several panels of judges talk about what they had seen in their courtrooms. And this is very much a moving target. And it's something where my personal belief is that the more of us who are out in practice and who see what's happening, and the more that we get together and talk about our own best practices, and we try to learn from other jurisdictions what they're doing to make sure that this extremely powerful tool is used in an effective and in an ethical way, the better. And so one thing that I've seen is that in our little group within the KCBA, we will circulate opinions that we see come out from judges when they find out through either their own research or their law clerk's research that, for example, a brief was entirely written by a generative AI tool. And you'll see a lot of, there are different remedies that courts are starting to use when they find out that lawyers are using these things unethically. And it's unfortunate, but I think that there are a couple more things I want to say really quickly. Number one, we know that a lot of these generative AI tools are based on language intake models that are biased themselves. So their output is inherently biased, and that's something that we have to watch out for. And number two, they can actually be a tool that enhances equity in some ways, because in theory, to the extent that you can use them ethically, they could help lawyers work more efficiently and therefore be cheaper and more accessible to more people. That I could talk about that for a very long time, but I'm out of time.
Thank you. And I have the last question for you. How do you proactively seek out furthering your knowledge and understanding of bias, diversity, inclusion, and accessibility? And how have you applied that to your work?
So I'll start with, in my first year of practice, I worked at Washington Appellate Project doing criminal appeals and also some civil appeals for folks who had had their parental rights terminated. And in that capacity, at the time, many opinions were coming out from Washington courts of appeal related to implicit bias in the courtroom. And one of the things that I do as an appellate lawyer is read over all of the transcripts of what happens in the trial court. And in many cases, you can see instances of where implicit bias is inserted into the proceeding that you wouldn't necessarily notice when it was happening. So part of what I try to do is highlight that when I'm writing my appellate briefs and bring it to the court's attention and try to make sure that I'm furthering that line of case law. The second thing is that I'm a member of the Washington Defender Association, and through that group, I'm able to go to continuing legal education seminars where we talk about these issues frequently, and we share our experiences that we've had in the courtroom with our clients, or that we've had with our clients in the courtroom with each other, so that we can make sure that we have an idea of what our best practices are when we confront these types of issues. I think that it's extremely important when we're dealing with issues having to do with bias, implicit bias, and frankly, outright racism, that we try to figure out how to handle it professionally and we try to figure out how to handle it ethically and effectively. And that's something I think part of the reason that I'm running for this seat is because I believe it's very important to have representation of all types on the bench. And it's important that defendants and victims and everyone in the courtroom see a bench that's reflective of the wider society. And so that's another thing I could talk about forever, but I appreciate the question.
Thank you. Now we have an opportunity for some follow-up questions, and I have a few, but I'm going to let our others go first. And Howard's got the first hand up. Take it, Howard. And
Hi.
you have 1 minute to respond to these. Sorry.
Hi.
Thanks.
So today in City Council Public Safety Committee, there was a discussion about the enforcement of the 2023 Drug Use and Possession Ordinance. And I think you probably know that in October of last year, the King County Public Defender found that there was a 4.1 ratio of African Americans versus white people that were prosecuted under that law. So given the racial disparity, given that diversion efforts have not been working so well in Seattle, what would you do? And would you support there being a drug court? And then remind us if there is a community court or what the status of that is.
Sure. So I think that part of what we're seeing from the statistics right now is the leftovers of what was happening during the last administration under City Attorney Ann Davison. And her approach was much different to the current city attorney's approach, as I understand it. And Davison was very much of the mind that the community court was not doing any good for defendants or for the city of Seattle. And as a consequence, without that, I think that we're reaping the consequences of that right now. And I think that is part of the problem that we're seeing today in Seattle and on the streets. I do believe that the evidence-based research shows that diversion programs work much more effectively than another day of incarceration or another day in jail. And also they're more cost effective. I think about this figure keeps coming into my head. It's the fact that the latest that I saw, we spend $207 per night per inmate, whether in the King County Jail or in one of our prisons in Washington State, for every single inmate, right? So that's your tax dollars, that's my tax dollars. And I visited clients in jail and I visited clients in prison, and last that I saw, I don't see a ton of reform happening in there. And especially when we're talking about nonviolent offenses, when we look at something like a DUI, for example, and you have the discretion to sentence someone up to a certain number of days for a first one, and it's like, say, if you want to give somebody 30 days instead of sending them to maybe a substance use treatment facility or a substance use treatment outpatient treatment program or something of the like, then what you're talking about is taking that person away from their family, away from their job, away from their ability to contribute to their community for that amount of time, which only contributes to this situation where, okay, well, then if they can't make any money or they lose their job, then it can lead to further commissions of crime, right? So
Thank you, Lindsay.
sorry.
It's okay. It's okay. Did someone else have a follow-up, or I can go? You mentioned the Washington Defenders Association earlier, and can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure. So that is a community of people who do defense work. It is primarily occupied by people who do public defense work. And I have a contract right now with Whatcom County, with the Whatcom County Public Defender. So my firm does primarily public defense work at this time, but there are also private defenders in it as well. And usually it's a place where defenders share resources when they're looking for ideas, if they're drafting a brief, or if they've hit a novel situation in one of their cases. I think a lot of criminal defense attorneys practice solo, and so it's a community where attorneys can get together and share ideas. There's an equivalent prosecutors association. I don't know exactly what it's called, but it's similar.
Thank you. As we are coming up on a close, we'll give you 90 seconds to do a closing. And if you want to throw in an extra second toward what is something that has surprised you about the role of a judge, you can do that as well.
Okay. Let me see. I'll think about that one. Let's see. Maybe I'll start with that. So what has surprised me about the role of a judge? I think that from what I've seen in my time in court over the years, I've seen a lot of judges be very compassionate and kind toward people in the courtroom. And that's something that I strive to emulate. I think that it's intimidating to go into court if you're not familiar with it. It's intimidating to go into court if you are familiar with it. And I think that when it comes to access to justice and making sure that everybody in the community knows that they have a system in place that's working, I think that judges are a key part of that. I'm running to be on the court because I've spent my career working in and around the justice system, and I've seen how much the decisions made at every level matter. The Seattle Municipal Court is where people first experience the court system in many cases, and those interactions can shape community trust or distrust for years to come. If elected, I would bring a few core commitments to the bench: to be fair, impartial in every case, and to treat every person who comes before me with dignity, and to take seriously the real-world impact of the decisions that I make. I also believe strongly in accountability and compassion, and that those two are not in tension. We can hold people accountable while also recognizing when treatment, support, or alternatives to incarceration can better serve both the individual and the community. Thank you so much for your time, and I would appreciate your support. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Lindsay. Thank you for coming in and joining us in LD 36. This is Lindsay Calkins for Seattle Municipal Court. And Lindsay, do you have a website or a follow-up email for people that would like to reach you?